We have two Daves and a Josh here. All are very good early stage investors, and they can tell you exactly what not to do and sometimes what to do. So I just want to start by saying, how many pitches did you guys get coming into Web Summit?
Probably like 20 on the way to this fucking stage, I think.
You've cursed twice in the first minute.
Yeah, this is going to be a long
twice.
panel.
You're showing off.
Oh shit, sorry.
Easily, in the hundreds of people who are starting to talk about their company, knowing that we're coming.
There were a lot of people that expected us to just walk up to their random booth, and so I have a list of all the booth numbers I'm supposed to visit.
You actually took down the booth numbers. Yeah. So you sort of interacted with them. Did you guys respond to any of the pitches at all?
I responded probably to 20 to 30 of them. The ones that were distinct, right? The ones that weren't a copy and paste pitch. And I think that in general, if you're pitching an investor, if you send something that's a copy and paste, we're all pretty good at copy and pasting rejections too.
That's a good strategy. And Josh, did you take any meetings while you were here?
I have a couple of meetings. The best meetings I take usually do come from an introduction of somebody that we mutually know. So I was introduced to a number of folks who said, hey, Josh, you're going to be in Dublin, so is this person. I really think you should meet. And so I've spent time kind of trying to schedule those. I think the rest of it is just gets overwhelming very, very quickly. And so it's hard for me to filter unless the email to me is like really tailored, understands my background, the stuff I've invested in, can kind of predict that going forward.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, you have an autoresponder up on your email all the time that says, like, literally, I'm probably not going to read this. Don't even try. And it's constant. It never goes away. It's not just a vacation responder. It's just perpetually there. So what prompted you to do this, and what's the best way to get to you then?
Usually the best way is to talk to one of our existing founders or people on the team. It's just really hard in 30 seconds to get your story across, and I'm probably blitzed during half of that, so it's not really very effective.
So if you are a first-time founder and you don't really know anyone in the scene at all, are you just screwed, or how do you get an investor's attention?
I would say use the buddy system, and if you're going to do that pitch like in my fucking face, like it's best to have somebody else say, hey, this person next to me is really awesome, and they've done X, Y, and Z, and then you might hack my psychology and get me to pay attention. But usually it's best done through a warm lead or somebody that I know or trust already.
If you don't have a warm lead, which not everybody's going to have, the best thing that a first-time founder can do is show something. So show what you've built. If you stand out with your product, if you stand out with your company, not with your idea, not with your words, not with your pitch, but actually a product, I think that cuts through the noise.
It turns out in the email to me, I'm usually reading them on my phone. If you've actually attached a couple of images, they show up right in the email. You can actually annotate the image a little bit. I'll look at the screenshots, and I may see something compelling that will then do it. If you send me a deck, it shows up as an attachment. I have to click on it, download it, and usually, if I'm just reading through my email, unless, again, it came through a referral or something else, I don't normally have the time to kind of process all of that. But like a couple of images in an email actually just show up on my phone. I read those all the time.
I mean, if you're actually going to try and pitch somebody straight up, I would probably say, pitch me the traction, not the story. There's a tendency for founders to want to tell you their life story and pitch you everything that they fucking do, and it's really more effective if you tell me about what the customers are that you have, if you have some revenue, and what problem you're trying to solve.
So you want more than a working prototype. Do you want someone who's been bootstrapping for a while? I mean, that's probably the ideal situation where they've already got a product that's rolling.
We invest pretty early, but we'd still like to see a functional prototype and some early customer usage.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're talking about like when you're when your founder doesn't have a connected network and everything else, you have to break above the noise. And you have to tell that 10-word story that actually makes a difference and says, whoa, I should pay more attention to that one. So if you have, look, Nike is now using my product, or Costco is now selling my service, or I reached 10 million page views in the first 3 days, those are the little nuggets that will actually go, whoa, there might be something more to this story. But if you can't break through the noise like that, it's very hard until you grind your way through it, work with friends, and start to build your network.
And standing out's a balance between doing something original and cutting through the noise versus doing a gimmick. I think the gimmicks don't work. When you send something and it's almost a joke, but it minimizes the seriousness of what you're trying to build, I don't think that's the message, right? Have you ever taken, you've taken pitches in costumes, right?
I've funded a company in a car before.
And costumes.
But I think you want to capture someone's attention and imagination, and you want to kind of know what stuff each of us might be interested in. I will say that, VCs tend to have the attention span of a 7-year-old on Ritalin, and in my case, probably a 4-year-old on Ritalin. And, pitches tend to break down in binary fashion, those with traction and those without. And so one of the things that happens is when people start telling me the story, I tend to think, they don't have traction. And so actually when you're trying to tell me that life story, you're telling me I don't have my shit together.
But that's in that first interaction, right? That's not in a sit-down conversation.
In a longer interaction, sure, you can go into that, but in the 30-second story or time frame.
Right, and that's, I think, the bigger point is that you should take the spot that you have and use it effectively. And so if you only have somebody's attention for 10 seconds, don't do your 10-minute pitch, right? Figure out what your 10-second sort of how do you get this person to want to spend more time with you versus try to get everything into that condensed amount of time?
And it really is a progression. It's 10 seconds of, what is this thing? How have I heard of it? It's a couple minutes of like, maybe I'll download the app, maybe I'll play with it, go to the website, try to sign up. Then another, 15 minutes of actually like playing with it and thinking about it more. And then you start to get that 30-minute or that 1-hour meeting. And like, that's a progression that you need to work to. And look, the other thing is, there are a lot, like these are not individual moments, these are connected lines from lots of little dots. So turns out when you are getting press in, TechCrunch or the Next Web or Business Insider, all the little coverage, actually like we do read that stuff and everything makes a little bit of an impression. So if I've heard of you 3 times already and then I start to get that 10-second impression, it's much more powerful than if it first comes as an incoming email.
I think one of the biggest flaws is entrepreneurs who look at investors as a bank, right? And that this is a transaction. We don't wake up every day looking to give out money. That's our job to make an.
So much to dole out.
But our job is to make an investment, right? It's not to be transactional. And there's a lot of founders that approach us as though it's a transaction, and we're looking to hand out a check on the spot. And instead, as Josh said, and as Mark Suster wrote in like 2010, you're looking for a line, not a dot. And nobody funds something on like, oh, here, thanks for telling me the story, here's your money. Right? You want to build a relationship. You want to get to know somebody. Most people would probably hate all 3 of us. And so maybe you don't want our money. So spend time getting to know us and figure out if like you can put up with his cursing, you can put up with my bluntness and sarcasm, and you can put up with Josh's nerdiness. Right? Maybe that's not a fit for what you're doing.
There should be some strategy involved. I mean, in a way, you guys are lucky to get into deals as well. It's not like, it should be a 2-sided sell, right?
Oh, 100%. And I think that there's founders that are sort of, I'll take money from anybody, that's an immediate turnoff.
Yeah, just like in dating.
I think people tend to try and bust through the front door, and we're looking for something a little bit more subtle, a little bit more creative, and oftentimes like telling me some information about the business that you're in, or asking a question. Somebody tweeted to me today, like, who's a good reference for SaaS?
You're not wearing shoes.
I'm not wearing, these are my socks, I'm sorry.
Dave McClure has taken off his shoes, he's really comfy with you all.
Well, I think the thing that gets missed is, I work at a larger firm where we do a lot of Series A's and B's. These are 10-year companies. Like for the great companies, for the great outcomes, we're looking to get on journeys that aren't a week, a month, a year. We're looking to get on the journey and be part of the company for 10 plus years, hopefully all the way through an IPO or an outstanding exit. And not everyone gets through all that way, but every time we sign up, that's what we're looking for. And so nobody like does a slam bam, thank you ma'am, let's get married, now we're like, stuck forever. It takes your time because you're going to be in that partnership for a very long time. And the worst thing about an investor relationship is it's actually the hardest thing to break up at all, because once the money's been given, that person's on the cap table, that money gets spent, that person's still on the cap table for the rest of your company's life. And so it's actually a very, very different relationship. So don't start it fast thinking that it should all happen very fast, but understand that it does take this process.
All right, so let's do some story examples. Give me some time that someone did something that was really outrageous, but it actually was impressive and worked out.
I had my car break down one time, and I was in a very well-known area in Silicon Valley where a lot of people hang out, Bucks in Woodside. And I said, hey, I'll listen to someone's pitch if you give me a ride to the car dealer to pick up my car. And turns out somebody was watching that and came and picked me up. But there was some backstory to that whole thing. Everybody thought like basically I wrote somebody a $100,000 check in the taxi. They'd gone through Techstars Boston. It was an MIT grad. They were working on an area that we were interested in gamifying email. I'd gotten a reference from another Valley VC who said, hey, these people are interesting. So they had prepared themselves for that moment, and they took the serendipity of the moment, and I decided to make a decision in a car. But there was a lot of little homework that went on before that moment.
So if you're stranded and you can't get away, and the only way to be saved is by a startup, then you'll invest.
This was in the era pre-Uber or Lyft, so now you'll need to come up with another tactic. But that was a great one for Dave.
And now you had kind of a creepy one, right? Someone flew from abroad to your doorstep uninvited.
Yeah,
it didn't work out.
It was a while ago, but I was sitting in my office one day, and the elevator opens up right into the office, and we weren't expecting anybody. The elevator opens up, and 5 guys walk out of the elevator, and we look, and we're like, "Who are you?" And they had flown over from Europe and wanted to have a meeting.
Web Summit?
Not from the web, but they flew over and wanted to have a meeting, and it's really hard to reject somebody that flew over 4,000 miles for fun. And so we're like, all right, come back in an hour and we'll have a meeting. We did. The problem was that they weren't prepared. They had nothing to actually talk about. So they had gotten on an airplane. They didn't think that on the 10-hour flight, let's prep. And so it ended up being this really uncomfortable meeting. Didn't work out, but it was an aggressive approach.
Okay.
I think we don't want to give people tips on how to hack us. That's actually not the objective. We want to see people with real businesses that are well matched to the areas that we're looking for and the stage that we're looking for. So for us, I would say businesses we're looking at that are maybe between $5,000 to $50,000 a month in revenue, or in areas where we can be helpful, maybe in consumer or small business marketing or productivity, and things that they already know that we might have an interest in, but aren't a previous company that we've funded.
I think for me, the key is that a founder should understand that investors are never funding you for what you've done. They're only funding you for where you're going. And so you're never going to get credit for all the stuff you've done and then get a check.
Well, there's some repeat entrepreneurs that definitely have an easier time raising.
But that's
they're
totally
still getting
different.
funded,
Right.
and I funded a couple of them, including some of the co-founders of Twitter. And you can say, oh, they co-founded Twitter, of course they can fund another one. But that's not the case at all. They come and they say...
So start by co-founding Twitter and then come pitch you
exactly.
guys.
But what they say is, we're going to go build something new, and we have a very strong theory of how we're going to launch it and what we're going to do. And we're always betting on what's going to happen, not what you've done before. But we're also looking for people who have every advantage that they can in the game.
There's where I would say, actually, I don't necessarily want to hear your grand fucking vision. In fact, I would say the more that founders talk in past tense, the more I'm interested. The more they talk in future tense, the less I'm interested.
But you're not giving them a reward, you're giving them permission to keep going.
Sure, but I want you to talk about the accomplishments you've already done, not hey, what do you think about my great idea for the future? And I'm I don't really care. I care about what your customers think about the products that you've built.
So this might be where we disagree, because I really look for that sort of grand vision, but a lot of proof points to show me that you are uniquely the one that can go achieve it. The first investment I led for Greylock, I actually met here at Web Summit. It was a company called Smart Things that had won the pitch competition, had been on, had a successful run on Kickstarter. Dave, I think, had already found the company, invested a little bit of money, and I met him here at Web Summit, and he just started talking about the future of the Internet of Things and the connected home and what would happen when we all had devices proliferating in our home, and how there was going to be 70 apps on your phone, and they were all going to not be able to talk to each other at all, and he was going to build that developer layer and that cloud layer and that software layer that was going to do it. And he'd already sold his first product on Kickstarter, raised over $1 million there, and he put together the big vision of why this was going to happen now, what these guys had already done. We met here and started talking. It took a year of conversations from that point until we led the Series A.
And Alex was a second-time founder who had been VC-backed. I discovered him because I was his third backer on Kickstarter. Right? He didn't go out and tell the story. He went out and built traction before he started pitching investors. And the traction was put a really interesting product on Kickstarter and go from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, so sometimes there is the traction thing, and that's very attractive, obviously, to investors, but sometimes these deals seem to happen like lightning. Have you guys done any deals since you've been here in Dublin? I've spoken to 2 investors that have.
Yeah, I not necessarily this particular conference or event, but a lot of times you will capture my imagination, but it's usually because there's been some homework done before.
Yeah. Right. I think the first time you meet somebody, right, if it's the first meeting, the first interaction, all you can judge on is the present value. We don't know your past, we don't know your future, so the only thing you look at is the right now, and then it's a matter of filling in the gaps. And so it's very hard to raise money on that single touch point. I just don't think that that's realistic. I don't think any of us are funding somebody off of like, oh, thanks for coming up, showing me what you're doing, here's a check.
But there is impulse buying and investing, right?
There's probably a history there. There's probably a history of either reading about the company.
Like a hot startup is like a hot pair of shoes.
But it's already hot, right? But it's already hot. So something happened before the moment of interaction, right? So it's either reading 4 articles about it, it's playing with the product. Maybe it's already sitting on my phone, I haven't met that founder, I meet them here. Now there's a history that I can build upon the conversation and go forward with.
I mean, I think even though we meet a lot of people and we have those interactions, I mean, at least for us, we have a more structured process where, we take applications on a quarterly basis for our incubator and accelerator program. A lot of those folks who apply know our founders or have met our founders and mentors. And we're going to do an information session here tomorrow at 11:30. If folks want to come check that out, we're going to be tweeting out on 500 startups. I'm pitching right now. So if you want to come, understand what our accelerator process is about, look for 500 strong hashtag and come to our information session tomorrow at 11:30.
Okay, but there is, I want to go back to the impulse buying thing, because it seems like, people look at a company like Yo, which did have a lot of traction, but was able to raise 1.5 million or more seemingly very quickly. It seems like it could just have been a very good idea at the right moment, or not such a good idea at the right moment that got traction. And then Elo is a social network we were talking about that was very hot, raised $5 million.
So I think these are both very unique situations. I mean, Elo, if you actually read when they raised that Series A, they had actually known the founders for 8 or 9 years and had actually tracked them through multiple businesses and multiple ideas, and had actually been tracking even Elo as the network was developing before they did it.
Elo was working on that for 2 years before they became overnight success.
Yeah, so every overnight success is often many years in the making. I mean, the stories of Snapchat sort of struggling for a year before it started taking off, or Twitter struggled for many years before it really started taking off. But the real secret is, investors don't invest just on a whim or on some traction. They meet the founder and they really listen to the founder's vision. I mean, my partner, one of my partners always tells me, he's like, we never know anything until you actually meet the founder and hear where they're going and what they want to do with it. Because you might have great traction but have no clue how to capitalize it. Or you might have a little bit of traction but 5,000 people who use your product every single day religiously, and you understand exactly why that's going to go from 5 to 50 to 500 to 5 million to 50 million over the next 3 or 4 years, and that becomes a journey that you want to jump onto. So it's really waiting until you hear that story. It's never, oh, your traction's great, let me throw money over the wire. And actually the people who do that who actually do invest that way tend not to be the most helpful investors when things go sideways, south, or anything else.
I would disagree with Josh. There are moments when we meet someone. I was in Istanbul about a month ago for a conference. We listened to 10 companies that were pitching on stage. One of them clearly had traction. It was 2 guys. I'd never met them before, but they had a couple million users. They had 20% sort of week over week growth. They were already sort of profitable on a $20,000 a month basis. They seemed really sharp. Before I flew out that evening, they drove me to the airport. I made them an offer on the spot.
Another ride.
Have you talked to them
So
since?
we need to get you in a car.
They're in our office in San Francisco in the current batch. So I mean, occasionally you do catch lightning in a bottle, but they had traction, they had a story, and other people in the Istanbul area had already invested in them.
Do you guys ever have buyer's remorse?
What?
Do you ever have buyer's remorse where you put a ton of money in a startup, you're like, this founder's awesome, and then you're like,
Every night.
crap.
We have buyer's remorse all the time, but it's much more the case of non-buyer's remorse. Me turning Travis down in 2010
So
at
that's
a
your
$10
deal that
million
got away.
valuation is my single greatest painful story, and I think about it every fucking week.
What about you two? Which are the ones that got away?
I mean, I think we try to think of these as journeys and investments and partnerships, and not as quick investments that we're going to make a ton of money on every single one. And so it's very hard to have buyer's remorse as long as the person is just as committed to building something great as we are. Look,
That's a bullshit answer.
I wish.
Come
I kind of
on.
think so too.
That's like the
real.
most political answer I've ever heard.
So
You're
the-
rambling like a blog post out loud.
Okay, fine.
Come on.
So of course, you wish everything was super successful, and sometimes they're not.
But you've fucked up. You've missed deals that you're
I've
like,
missed
I
plenty
should have
of
done
deals.
that, right?
I've missed plenty of
Right.
deals.
And you lose
Which
sleep
one?
over those things.
What'd you miss?
Josh is in a different category where he's making large bets, and he's got to do studied analysis, and he's going to pass on a lot of shit. I think you and I are in situations where we're doing a lot more frequent investments a lot earlier, and we're going to take a flyer on some stuff more often.
Yeah,
than
and
Josh is.
and when you screw up, either saying yes to the wrong company and about a month later you're like, oh my God, that was a terrible decision, or on the flip side, you say no to something and then you see it just take off, and you do think, what could I have done differently? You replay those moments in your head all the time,
You
right?
missed Singo, right?
Yeah, I missed, Yik Yak is a really interesting company
Yik
that's
Yak
growing
is,
like a wildfire, and I talked to them on the phone for 20 minutes. We had a bad connection. He was traveling, I was traveling. It just didn't like come together, and I sit there and I replay it. I'm like, maybe I should have sat in my office instead of walking, right? Like, you start thinking, what could I have done differently to detect that in a different way?
I think I don't worry about that as much as like it's really easy as an investor to fall into being, God on the mountain and being an asshole and like writing people off in 30 seconds. And as much as I have a reputation for probably being an asshole, even when I say no, I don't want to be an asshole to that person, and I want to make them feel like I at least listened to their pitch, and if I said no, here were the reasons why, and here's where I might take a listen again if you get to certain points.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time, but Tisch actually just switched over. Well, he does investing still, but he's also an entrepreneur who just raised $8 million for his app. So I want to hear, right? His app Spring. So I want to hear what Tisch did to get $8 million.
Wait.
Let's hear the
Tisch,
elevator pitch.
can I get in, man?
I mean, I think it.
We got a deal happening right on stage.
There it goes.
This is
Euros, man. It's
What
real
share?
money.
Got
It's
it.
real fucking money.
Without even saying a word, you got some money.
we spent a year building.
It's so easy.
Thank you, Dave.
It's that easy.
But this is history, right? He
Right
knew
there,
he
right
knew where
there.
I was going. We spent a year building the product before we started talking to investors, and I think that was the most important thing. We showed up with a product that people could touch and play with, and we took our time and we worked with people that we wanted to work with, versus going out and trying to make it a
Give
transactional
me the 30-second
product.
elevator pitch.
We're a mobile commerce app that connects brands directly with consumers, and so it's a single destination on your iPhone that you can shop from over 500 brands. We have brands like Theory, Helmut Lang, Rag & Bone, Coach, Marc Jacobs, and 495 others.
Josh, would you invest?
I've tried too many times.
There we go. Okay, well, cool. Thank you guys so much for the time and for listening.
Yeah.